and welcome to Good Evening Britain, the Force for Good's weekly show, coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on our Facebook, our YouTube, our Twitter, and on our TikTok. And thank you to the folks who are coming in on all of those channels. Great to have you here in this great British evening here throughout the United Kingdom. Great to see all the folk, especially Debbie's come in straight away. She was the first in tonight. Good evening to you, Debbie. And great to see Adam as well. And Harvey from the West Midlands. And how are you tonight, Derek? And Paul from Kent, which is the Garden of England, as they like to define themselves down there. And Becky Young says, good evening, Brits. Hope you are well too, Harry. And good evening to Stuart from Elgin. And good evening to folks on TikTok also. Now tonight we're going to be talking about devolution and why the Scottish Nationalists don't understand devolution, and why that leads them to think that democracy is being denied, why that leads them to think that they can have a mandate for a second referendum if they get enough votes in Holyrood. All of those misconceptions of reality are as a consequence of not properly understanding the devolutionary relationship. So we're going to get into that in some considerable depth tonight, because we've written a big article which lays it all out for you. And I had a bit of an epiphany today, and I realised that's why the Scottish Nationalists believe that democracy is being denied, and that's why they believe that they can get a mandate in Holyrood. It's because they don't understand that Holyrood is British. Holyrood is British. That's one of our new slogans now. One of our new 3-word slogans. Holyrood is British. And of course, on this great British evening, which is Robert Burns's Burns Day. So some of you might actually be at a Burns supper with family or friends tonight, and others have decided to watch A Force for Good, where, to be frank with you, you'll just get as much entertainment. Although Burns suppers are great if you're into that sort of thing. I've been to one. Has anybody out there been to a Burns supper? And if you have, what did you think of it? Please send in your thoughts on Burns suppers. And we're going to be talking about Burns and how he was a Scottish and a British patriot, all wrapped up in one, and how he wrote poems from all sorts of from almost, you could say, both political angles. And he's very famous for one which we'll just put up here. We've got a Burns poem which we'll put on the screen, where he says, "Be Britons still to Britons true, among ourselves united, for never but by British hands shall British wrongs be righted." What a great sentiment for Burns Day. Be Britons still to Britain true, among ourselves united, for never but by British hands shall British wrongs be righted. And they need to tell Nicola Sturgeon that, because she thinks that it's the European Union that's going to right the British wrongs. But no, it's not. It's going to be the British people acting together who will sort things out. Okay. Ayot from Yorkshire says, a chat there. Jonesy says, if there was one thing you were to change in your life, what would it be? Well, that's a very interesting question directed to the world, and many people will have different views on that. Hello to Peter Downs, good to see you in the house. And Adam's watching from Leicestershire, known as the heart of rural England. Adam says, the Scottish nationalists claim that independence is the only way to stop Westminster overruling Scotland. Are they correct? Well, if Scotland was independent, of course, you wouldn't have a British Parliament telling you what to do. But the point of unionism is the British Parliament is there to speak for all of Britain as one. And those of us who love the nation of Britain want it to stay together and want it to be politically represented through our collective central British Parliament. Kat says, hello friends, missed the live stream last week. It's good to be back watching in the here and now. It's good to have you watching in the here and now, Kat. I hope things are well with you. Harvey says that his great-granddad served in the Royal Scots Fusiliers and has been saying this to everyone today. Happy Burns Day. Harry says even though he's in the south of England, at his residential home, they do stuff for Burns Day. I think that's wonderful, isn't it? It is wonderful, and that's an interesting thing. I've noticed that there's a lot of people, various clubs in England who do celebrate Burns Day, and here in Scotland, I'm not aware of any Scottish clubs that celebrate English poets on that kind of basis. That's interesting, isn't it? That was good to know. It's good to know that Burns is celebrated down there in the south of England. Becky says that she's not having a Burns supper, but she's having some naffy tea. The naffy tea which she won in a competition a couple of weeks ago. The prize for this week's competition is one of these fantastic Union Jack pens, along with a Union Jack trolley token, also known as a Union Jack keyring at the same time, and you can take that trolley token out, see what I mean, and then stick it back in there. And that the competition will be coming up at the bottom of the hour. And well, let's talk some serious stuff here about the Scottish National Party and the extent to which their anti-fossil fuel agenda should be an open goal for us pro-UK, pro-British Unionists, because it's Scotland's oil used to be the big selling point for the SNP, but now they don't care about Scotland's oil. In fact, they want to abandon Scotland's oil. Well, who's there to pick up that banner after the Scottish National Party dropped it? Nobody at the moment, really, but it's an open goal. It's an absolute open goal for the first pro-UK party that comes forward and says, let's reinvest in in the North Sea and in fossil fuels around the Scottish coast. That's an open goal for unionism. So let's score that particular goal. And this was brought home to me when I read this article. Sturgeon's plan to leave millions of barrels of oil untapped. That's from this month, last week, in the Telegraph. A new draft energy strategy published yesterday backed a presumption against exploration for new offshore reserves and officially ditched support of unlimited extraction, claiming it was not compatible with climate ambitions. Absolutely awful. Absolutely awful. And just to make us even colder, the document also confirms opposition to new nuclear power stations, which the Scottish government has the power to block. Imagine that. Imagine devolving power to Holyrood, and during that devolution of power, you give them power over nuclear power stations. The Labour Party at the time must have been utterly mad to do that. Utterly mad. Utterly mad. Such energy, such an important British national power. All of the United Kingdom depends upon all of the resources throughout the United Kingdom being fully exploited for our energy. And yet, the original devolutionary so-called settlement gave the SNP power to block nuclear power stations. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Just shows the absolute lack of thought that went into that. I'd like to know the people who actually wrote that, and I'd actually like to line them up and question them on what were they thinking when they allowed that kind of power to be devolved to Holyrood. Did they not realise it would imperil all of Britain down the line? If you prevent the Scottish National Party exploiting the resources of Scotland for power, if you're going to prevent them doing that, that's you're allowing them to hurt all of the United Kingdom. Unbelievable. Anyway, it gets worse. PM accuses Sturgeon of abandoning the North Sea. Well, quite rightly. Quite rightly. Rishi Sunak said curtailing further exploration in the North Sea would backfire on the environment by increasing the amount of oil and gas that would have to be imported, with more than double the carbon footprint. That's, of course, another thing. If you even believe in all that climate stuff, which I personally don't, but if you even believe in that, then obviously it's going to be more problematic to actually import the oil and gas, which you need, which we will need for years and years yet, because the idea of being able to supply all our needs through simply so-called renewables, we're so far off that. We're so far off that it's going to take years and years and years before that's ever going to be physically possible. Stephen Flynn, the SNP's new Westminster leader, also backed a presumption against new exploration. Surprise, surprise. Despite thousands of constituents in his Aberdeen South seat being employed in the industry. What a plonker. What a plonker. But as I say, that's an open goal for the British government or even the Labour Party. If they wanted to exploit that, they could really kick the SNP into touch on those kind of matters, and perhaps they will do. Mr. Sunak seized on a reference that Mr. Flynn made to the energy crisis, saying, quote, and I want to talk about this, so listen to this. Rishi Sunak goes, quote, what we do now know is that the Scottish government does not want to support the Scottish energy industry and the 200,000 jobs that it produces, close quote. Well, he's absolutely right there, but that's not the rhetoric that I would have used, because listen to that. What we do now know is that the Scottish government does not want to support the Scottish energy industry. No, it's not the Scottish government, it's the SNP and the Greens do not want to support the Scottish energy industry, okay? So you are the Prime Minister. You use that as a teaching moment against your political opponents. You see, for most of us, the phrase the Scottish government is very abstract. It's very abstract and it's very removed from our day-to-day existence. And when we think of the Scottish government, we don't really know exactly to whom that is referring, because it's referring to an awful lot of people, including civil servants as well. But you're the Prime Minister, so you want to be having a go at your political opponents. So you want to rephrase that. This is what you want to say. What we do now know is that the SNP and the Greens do not want to support the Scottish energy industry. That's what you say. The SNP and the Greens. Or you make it even more personal. What we do now know is that Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP and Patrick Harvie and the Scottish Greens do not want to support the Scottish energy industry. That's what you do. You nail it down personal, because politics is about the personal. Okay, so goodness me, the SNP make it personal. Oh, they make it very personal when they're criticising the Tories or Sunak or any of these people. They make it personal, okay, and it hits home and it works. So stop using this sterile, abstract phrase, the Scottish Government, which is not even correct as well, because as we know, the Scottish Government is not on a par with the British Parliament and with the British Government. So many mistakes he's using. One, he's not making it personal. He's using this abstract phrase called the Scottish Government. Number two, he's putting subliminally, subconsciously into our heads the idea that this thing called the Scottish Government is somehow on a par with the British Government, which is not. Now, if he can't get over talking about the Scottish Government, at least say this. At least talk about the devolved Scottish Government or the Scottish devolved government. At least put it into the proper constitutional context. Don't just be throwing out the phrase there like our two governments, the Scottish Government and the British Government. No. You can talk about the British Government and the devolved Scottish Government so that people understand the relationship. Because believe me, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment, most people don't understand that constitutional relationship. The idea that the British government is the central one and that the Scottish one is devolved from it. So you should be saying that. You shouldn't be saying the Scottish government. You should be saying the devolved Scottish government, if that is, you insist on using that phrase at all. And secondly, I don't like this phrase, the Scottish government, because for most of us, we hear the word Scottish and we like the word Scottish. And so if you're using the word Scottish government in a negative context, there will be some people out there that just hear the word Scottish, get a knee-jerk reaction and won't listen any further. So that's another reason why you shouldn't use that phrase, Scottish government, in a negative context. It's another reason why you should be more specific. You should be talking about the SNP and the Greens, or as we're calling them now, the SNPGreens, all one word. The SNPGreens, because it's becoming very clear that is in fact what we're dealing with. It's not two parties, it's one party called the SNPGreens. So there you go, 3 reasons not to use that phrase at all. 1, it's not personal. 2, it's not constitutionally correct. And 3, instead of using the word Scottish, which some people have, many people, most of us have very good allusions with, say, the SNP government or the SNP administration, but be specific about it. And I'm not even the Prime Minister and I have to be telling him stuff like that. That's ridiculous when you think about it, isn't it? Absolutely ridiculous. So we put that, a lot of what we've just said there was in our article, which you'll find there in the comments. Lizzie says once they've got independence they can elect who they want. That's true, isn't it? Looking at other comments. Hi to Kenny. As Harvey says, Burns is a British tradition as well as a Scottish one. That's true. Ryan wishes everybody a happy Burns night to all Unionist kinsmen. That's a good phrase. Unionist kinsmen. Graham Brondon says, you do realise not everyone that wants independence actually supports the SNP. That's correct. That's why we call them the SNPGreens. Because the Greens want it as well. And of course there's also the Alba Party, which is a small breakaway from the SNP. But I think my point is fairly clear about what we're saying here. So, as Paul says, Westminster and the Supreme Court overruling the SNP is exactly what the majority voted for in 2014. That's correct. It's Sturgeon that's opposing democracy. And Adam also fires in with the oil. Scotland's oil is Britain's oil. Absolutely. You know, we Unionists, we believe in sharing our resources. Absolutely, we believe in sharing our resources. It belongs to England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland together. And that's such an important thing that differentiates us. We've got a picture here of something that Penny Mordaunt said in Parliament, and this is as good a time as any just to bring it up just after Adam's comment there. She goes, this was on the 19th of January, Penny Mordaunt goes, my response to the SNP's business question today: you don't have to believe in the Union of the UK to believe you have a duty of care to the citizens of it. All of them, whoever they are, wherever they live. Well, Penny, I have to tell you, you do actually need to believe in the Union of the UK to believe that you have a duty of care to the citizens of it. All of them, whoever they are and wherever they live. And as we tweeted back there, we said that you actually do need to believe in the Union to take that point of view. That's the reason why the SNP do not. Okay. So the idea of a duty of care is very much a unionist idea, and your SNP supporters and your Green nationalists, they don't believe in that. They don't believe that they have a duty of care to the rest of the UK. That's why they are separatists. Okay, so Penny, great girl, says a lot of good stuff, but you've got to understand the nature of who you're dealing with, Penny, and hopefully you might come to understand that crucial element of unionism, which is the duty of care that we have to everybody throughout our islands. And that duty of care is not felt by the Scottish nationalists, the SNP supporters and the Greens, as we're trying to be more specific now in calling them. Hey, good evening to Nelson and to Wayne from Stockport. And Derek says, as a union of nations, we all share each other's resources. Exactly. And we know that Scotland is rich enough and clever enough and big enough to share its resources with its family members throughout the United Kingdom. We always say that. It's the SNP and Green supporters who are the small-minded ones, I'm afraid to say, who are against sharing and caring for their fellow men and women throughout the United Kingdom. And Stuart says as well that Sturgeon is turning her back on the whisky industry as well. Well, if there's something that works, she'll turn her back on it, I think, is the lesson that we have to learn. Hey, evening to Anthony. Hope you are well from Edinburgh. Harvey says, being in Aberdeen relies massively on the oil. And as Becky says, didn't the SNP promise Scotland its own energy company? Well, I don't know how they intend to develop the energy, that's for sure. But energy independence is an absolutely crucial thing for any nation, and it's utterly absurd and terrible the way that the British government has thrown that away over the years. Energy independence and food security. I mean, we are literally run by people who have not been rising to the occasion. Let me be nice about it. But don't think that Scotland's going to be run any better. I mean, we know how Scotland's going to be run by people who are, it's be run by the SNP and Green Brigade, who have not yet shone their light on us. And because, as Eric says there, yes, it was funny that during the separation referendum, that's all the SNP were talking about, was the importance of oil, or at least Alex Salmond at the time. But now they don't want oil. We're all just going to somehow be able to power our industries by the strength of the hot air that comes out of Holyrood. Derek says it was wrong to change the name of the Scottish executive, as it was then, to the Scottish government. Yeah. So, yes, I wanted to. What's the time? Well, it's the bottom of the hour, so let's have our On This Day in British History Matters. On this day in British history, because we don't know where we're going if we don't know where we've been. And if we don't know where we've been, then we don't know where we are. So today, 25th of January, is the birthday of course, Robert Burns, who was born in 1759 in Alloway, in the great British county of Ayrshire. And he died in 1796. But he was, of course, an amazing poet, and there's nothing I can say that will bring him back. But what I want to bring back is his unionism, of course. And we've already put up that little poem, but let's put it up again and let's read it out again, because it really is a cracker. And it's from a poem which is sometimes called Does Haughty Gaul Invasion Threat? And it's also called the Dumfries Volunteers, because he joined the Dumfries Volunteers, which was a British army unit, when he was in Dumfries, and he wrote this poem for them. And it goes to some length describing the importance, basically, of sticking together, but it's also got a lot of good stuff in it. And he says stuff like, "Oh, let us not like snarling curs. Oh, let us not like snarling curs in wrangling be divided." And he's talking, of course, about the British people themselves. They shouldn't be fighting like snarling dogs, but rather we should be united, because it was only by being united that our wrongs can be righted. Fantastic stuff. Okay. And he also made one or two comments about the British Constitution as well. And we've got a picture here, a graphic of a statue where he goes, "I look upon the British Constitution to be the most glorious on earth, or that perhaps the wit of man can frame." That's some praise. The most glorious on earth, or that perhaps the wit of man can frame. That's the British Constitution as far as Robert Burns was concerned, and he wrote that in a letter on the 5th of January 1793. So that's the Burns statue, by the way, in George Square in Glasgow. Okay, so very shortly after he died, he died in 1796 on the 21st of July, and he was buried in St Michael's churchyard in Dumfries. And he was originally buried in a picture here that we've got of his burial place. There's the site of the original grave of Robert Burns in St Michael's churchyard in Dumfries. But somebody must have thought, we're going to dig him up and put him into something grander, because there's a mausoleum now in St Michael's churchyard. There it is there, which presumably stands over the body of Robert Burns. So has anybody ever visited that in Dumfries? I might check in on that next time I'm down there. Good. So the first Burns supper was held in 1801 by friends of his. So that was like 5 years after he died, thereabouts, 4 or 5 years after he died. And it's been a regular occurrence ever since. And it's gone, of course, worldwide. And the first Burns Club was started in Greenock in that same year, 1801. And ever since then, the world has been remembering him. And there won't be many people who are remembered in that way, year on, year out, on a certain day, where people join to drink and eat and remember him. So quite remarkable. That was on this day Robert Burns was born in 1759 in Alloway, and we put up an article, The Britishness of Robert Burns. We wrote that probably about 10 years ago, and you'll find the link in the comment thread there. Marcus says, "Evening, Alistair. Scottish nationalists have no idea how lucky they are. They have more media coverage and bias on their side, yet claim to be oppressed. Yet Britain was never under Napoleon or Hitler or communist dictatorship. The only oppression is under Sturgeon's rule, and they don't realise it." That's right, we're certainly not oppressed in any way in the United Kingdom. Thank goodness. Well, although don't get me wrong, there are people who have got designs over us to try to oppress us, so we've got to be very careful of that. I was at a meeting on Monday night, may as well mention this. It was a meet-up by an organisation called the UK Column, and they had a meet-up in Motherwell, of all places, and would you believe, I counted, as I always do, 120 people there. 120 people. And the theme of the night was, in fact, the extent to which things like the surveillance state is creeping in on us, and not just in the United Kingdom, but throughout the Western world, as well as other strange things that are being put upon us, how control of the media is getting tighter, as it appears to be, certainly on certain key issues which can't even be talked about, otherwise they'd take this YouTube video down. So, we are, in that sense, we are under the thumb of powers that be. But as far as straight oppression, as far as Nicola Sturgeon is concerned, of course, it's a different matter, isn't it? But what came out of that is that one of the people there, one of the speakers, David Scott, is going to be appearing on our show. We're going to be interviewing him probably in about a fortnight or thereabouts. We'll see. Looking forward to that. He's been on the show before, actually. One of the very first people we ever interviewed about 2 years ago. So looking forward to interviewing him again from the UK Column. Yes, Becky makes a good point that the SNPGreens think that the Scottish so-called government is Holyrood, and that Westminster is the English government. And so when the Westminster overrules Scotland, they think it's England is somehow overruling Scotland. That's not correct. It's the British Parliament. Westminster is the UK Parliament and government, and Holyrood is the Scottish administration. The UK government has every right to overrule bad decisions that will affect the people of the rest of the United Kingdom. Absolutely, try explaining that to them. Well, I will try to explain that to them right now. Now, This was brought home to me when I read an issue of The National from a few days ago, and there's somebody rabbiting on here, a full frontal attack on our democracy. They're referring, of course, to the GRR bill that got overthrown by the Westminster Parliament. Somebody rabbiting on here about how Holyrood could get a mandate at the next Scottish election and so on. And I'm thinking, what is it that these folk, misguided folk, don't understand? Why is it they think things like that? And I've come to this epiphany today, that is, they don't understand that Holyrood is British. Holyrood is a creation of the British Parliament. Okay, if you think of the British Parliament as the body, then Holyrood, or any devolved assembly, is an arm of that body. Okay, so Holyrood is a British creation, is a British institution, and it's part of the British state. And the idea was that it would actually help to somehow strengthen the bonds of that British state. So it was set up, and it does remain today, although we often don't think of it like this. It is a British established institution. It is itself an arm of the British state. And so it is quite correct to say that Holyrood is British. It's not a separate Scottish institution set up by an independent Scottish state. And I think this is the key reason that Scottish nationalists and Greens don't conceive of that. And I'm not blaming them for that, because since Holyrood got set up in 1999, there has been no attempt to explain the correct constitutional relationship. No attempt to explain it whatsoever. And so people, say you're growing up, say you went to school, you came of age in 1999, you're not going to know any better. You're going to think that Holyrood has somehow always been there, and that it was maybe set up by the Scottish state, and it's, when you see everybody talking about it as being a government, the same as the British government, you quite rightly, quite normally presume it must have the same powers. Therefore, you don't understand how one parliament in London, with presumably the same powers as this one in Edinburgh, how can this one stop this one from getting its way? Of course you're going to be confused about that. Of course you are, because nobody's explained to you the correct constitutional relationship, which is that the British Parliament is the centre collective parliament for all of the United Kingdom, for what we like to call Britain as one, and it has devolved arms of that parliament, of that body. And the idea is that these devolved arms will help the overall governance of the United Kingdom together. That's the ideal. So these devolved assemblies or parliaments, whatever you want to call them, these are British institutions. And of course, a British institution in Edinburgh cannot get a mandate to destroy Britain. A British arm of the British body has to do what the body says. So if the body decides to overrule the arm, then that's just the natural way of things. Okay, so we Unionists, we understand Holyrood as British, and so we understand that it can't have a mandate. It can't make a mandate to destroy itself. It can't make a mandate to destroy the thing that created it, any more than, I think up another analogy for that as well, but you can't create something that then destroys the thing that created it. So Holyrood is British, and it cannot have a mandate, cannot develop a mandate to break up Britain. I'll write a wee article about that this weekend and just put that out there, because it needs to be said. again and again and again. There needs to be more effort to explain and understand the correct constitutional relationship. And we're hoping to write a book this year as well, in time for the general election next year, where we're going to be trying to drill down into this and come out with more points, because this is going to be a big thing now moving forward. And it's all a consequence of the complete misrepresentation of what Holyrood is. Holyrood is a devolved arm of the British body. Holyrood is a British institution and a creation of the British state. It's not some wildcat thing that got established by some separatist state. But the SNP, of course, love to misrepresent it as that. Now, I forgot to ask the question, which is for a Union Jack pen and for a Union Jack trolley token, and the latest issue of Union Heart. And the question is, on this day, Robert Burns died. In which great British town is he buried? Now send your answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the first person with the correct answer will pick up that prize, along with the latest issue of Busting Indie Myths. And so on this day in 1796, Robert Burns died. In which great British town is he buried? Answers to contact@aforceforgood.uk, please. Good. Now, here's something that I'd like to ask folks. Who would you like to see us interview? Okay, who would you like to see us interview? Because we're going to try to interview some new folk this year. Maybe some of you would like to be interviewed on the show. If you would, please contact us at that email, and we'd love to talk to you about it. But who else would you like to see us interview? Marcus says, when have we ever had a good First Minister? McLeish, McConnell, Salmon, Sturgeon. My answer is none. The only time when you might say that devolution kind of worked in the way that it was meant to work was when we had a Labour administration at Holyrood and a Labour government at Westminster. In those cases, and that didn't last for long, but when it did, Holyrood wasn't being used as a weapon against the centre. But the problem, of course, is that if the administration in one of these devolved assemblies is opposite to what the British government happens to be, then it tends to lead more just to division and chaos than it does to actually strengthening. But nevertheless, we shouldn't forget that the aim is to strengthen. Well, Mark Donald says, the Selkirk grace. Some have meat and canna eat, and some have meat that want it, but we have meat and we can eat, so let the Lord be thanked. My mum, he says, had that on an ornament when I was at school. It's a good wee grace. It's called the Selkirk grace, and it's called the Selkirk grace because it was said, I believe, the first time at the home of the Earl of Selkirk. Double O Mo says that the Prime Minister should say that his government, Her Majesty's government, has come to His Majesty's government has come to the realisation that the Scottish Executive has developed a delusional understanding of the institutions and authority which facilitates and secures it. I like that. I might include that in my wee article this weekend, Double O Mo. They do have a delusional understanding of the institutions and authority which facilitate and secure it, and a delusional understanding of their own particular place in that reality. Adam says that he wants to put on record that we actually live in a nation of unions. Quite right, rather than a union of nations as such. Pierce asks, in upcoming local elections, well, the local elections, what do you mean upcoming? They're going to be, in Scotland, they're going to be several years away, but which Unionist party will be the most successful? That's a good question. Becky Young says, loving the Kelpies there. Well, this time that may be referring to our Kelpie card, which is available at our shop. And this is blank inside and on the back, and it's taken from a photograph which is almost identical to that. Well, it is identical to that when we were there to welcome the late Her Majesty to the Queen Elizabeth II Canal on the 5th of July 2017. A lot of folk that day. Really good day as well. You can get those at our shop. We'll just put up the shop link there as well. There we go. Folks, one or two people have been reporting having trouble ordering from the shop when they got to the final checkout. And I have noticed that this has become a wee bit of a problem in the last fortnight. Now, if that happens to you, you can use PayPal, because there's also a PayPal checkout. So if you somehow aren't able to go through the normal means by clicking on the orange checkout button, please click on the PayPal checkout button. And if you don't have a PayPal account, then on the little box that comes up at the bottom, there is a little thing that says don't have a PayPal account. You can click on that and you can still put in your details and you can guest checkout. Okay, so if you can't check out via the normal mechanism, click on the PayPal button to check out if you've got a PayPal account, or click on the PayPal button and then guest checkout. But if you can't click, if you are experiencing trouble, please do contact us, because we don't want that problem to last for long. Darryl says, hi Alistair, you're doing a great job. Well, thank you. Respect from one of your English brothers. No surrender. All the best to you, Darryl. Thank you for your positive comments. Marcus says he looks at history from different countries and thinks Britain is so lucky, that could have been us, yet it happened to other people rather than to us. Isn't that so true? We are really blessed to be British. There's no question about it. It is a great country as far as things are concerned. Kenny thinks the Nats are imploding. I do hope you're right. Paul says, what a pity that the SNP don't value our British stability, our moderation, freedom and independence, which was centuries in the making, especially in our increasingly unstable and oppressive world. Well, it's our job, Paul, to try to help those of us who can appreciate it and who are there waiting to appreciate it, and I do believe that there are enough out there who at the moment just haven't heard and haven't considered those sorts of things that you've been pointing out, because the history of Britain is such an amazing thing. And we're not going to be broadcasting next week because I have to take 10 days off to research the next issue of Union Heart, which is going to be a tribute to the Union of the Crowns, this is the 420th year of it, which was when the Scots King James VI also became the King of England. And in order to do what I want for this particular magazine, I've had to buy a couple of really very expensive old books, and one of them I've got here right now. It's called The Union of England and Scotland, 1603 to 1608 by Bruce Galloway, and this wasn't particularly cheap. I found it on the internet, but it's got, what an amazing book. It's got that 5-year period. The Union of the Crowns was 1603, but for the next 5 years, James the King really tried to promote a political union. Now, it wasn't successful because the people in Scotland, and especially in England, were not ready to hear that. But what I'm learning in this amazing book is the extent to which he really put the concept of Britain as a political unit on the table in a way that had never been done before. Never been done before. And so a lot of the people in England, and Francis Bacon especially, and people in Scotland were wrestling with the idea because it was new to them. So he really brought this in a political way to them. And even though he was not successful in politically uniting the Isles, he certainly did so regally. And just so much in here to bring out, so much to bring out in a way that is really going to be quite remarkable, and I'm going to be able to do so. It goes, for example, it talks about James's attempts to, quote, instill peace, order and brotherhood into his two peoples, to reconcile their commercial and economic systems, and establish a mixture of English and Scots at court. So he attempted to do all of these things, and some of which he certainly managed in a small way, but he's not been properly understood, and the coming together of Britain in that way during that period is also something that needs to be brought out, because it's absolutely fascinating, and it is where unionism really starts to be put on the table as a political concept. Although they didn't have the ism words for it back then, that's exactly what it was all about. So I'm going to be bringing that out in March, but I need to get through that book, and I need to get through another book before I can even start to write up the stuff from it. So I need to do that over the next 10 days. So we won't be broadcasting next Wednesday, I'm afraid. Comic Toon says the Acts of Union in 1707 was well deserved, and the sharing of resources and the oils is what made the UK still run fine and clear. Absolutely sharing. The SNPGreens don't want to share. They don't have that shared duty of care for their fellow men and women throughout the United Kingdom, and don't believe them when they say that they do, because if they did, they would be pro-UK. They would be pro-unionist. Becky Young says the wee book needs to be pointed out as well, and it needs to be posted to every Scottish household, which might teach them a thing or two. Well, if somebody out there is watching and they're a multimillionaire, I can't think of any better ways to spend your money than to support a force for good in our outreach, in our action, and in our literature creation, because we do need your help. If you've got money that can help save the country. Let's put the shop link up as well when I hold that one up. Good. aforceforgood.uk/shop-1. That's where you'll get all our stuff, including this one. Scotland Now, a warning to the world. by Tom Gallagher, which is a very fine piece of work by Professor Tom Gallagher from Bradford University. A good unionist man. Oh, here's an interesting comment from Ryan that the Scottish secessionists have a strange paradox when it comes to Robert Burns, because they always talk about his infamous Parcel of Rogues poem as proof of the alleged corruption involved in the Union, which has long since been disproved, yet they fail to acknowledge that Burns never really specified which Parcel of Rogues he was referring to, as it is just as likely that he was referring to the Scottish Parliament and its incompetence in the folly of the Darien scheme. That's a very good point, and that was actually made by a historian who pointed out that that was the first time that had been used. The phrase Parcel of Rogues was referring to the people who mucked up the Darien scheme. Okay, we can get rid of the shop one now. And Paul always says Scots vote in greater numbers for Westminster elections. That's because it's recognised as the real national government. That's absolutely so true. As we said here, Westminster's unity mandates. They have a constitutional mandate, a democratic mandate, and a popular mandate. And the popular mandate is measured by the number of people who actually bother to vote at these elections. And the average for the last 5 elections, the average turnout for the last 5 elections at Westminster elections in Scotland is 66% of people in Scotland vote at Westminster elections on average. And the average in Scotland for the last 5 Holyrood elections is 54%. Okay, 12% less. Barely over half the people in Scotland bother to vote at Holyrood elections, and that table with details is in our latest issue of Union Heart, which you can get at our shop at forceforgood.uk/shop-1, or you can get if you become a monthly donor, and we really do rely upon our monthly donors, and that's our Union Supporters Programme. We'll put up the link for the Union Supporters Programme there, at forceforgood.uk. We'll fire it along the bottom of the screen as well. Good. There we go. forceforgood.uk/union-supporters. Becky's looking forward to our next issue of Union Heart, which will be out in March. As I say, it is free to Union supporters, or it will be for sale on our shop. TC says that his wee book for the Union takes pride and place in his Unionist home. Great stuff. Great stuff. Excuse me. We have a winner. Now, I asked, on this day, Robert Burns passed away in 1796, and in which great British town is he buried? And the answer was, of course, Dumfries. And the winner is Chris Farron. Congratulations, Chris. We'll be sending you your Union Jack keyring, your Union Jack pen, and a complimentary copy of Busting Indie Myths to you. Now, could you just please send your address to that email, and we'll get those in the post to you tomorrow. Well done, Chris. Thanks very much for taking part, and thank you to everybody else who took part. Sorry that you didn't win, but you might have a better chance next time. Debbie says, congrats, Chris. Harvey says, well done, Chris. Harry Brown says, great job, Chris. As does Catherine say, congratulations. And Becky also. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, folks, it's the top of the hour, so we're going to say goodbye. Just to remind you that we won't be broadcasting next Wednesday, but we will be back the week after, which is on the 8th of February at 7 o'clock. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's commented tonight on TikTok, on Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Please do give us a thumbs up. Please do give us a subscribe on YouTube. Please give us a retweet on Twitter. Please give us a share on Facebook. It really helps to get the message out. Okay, folks. Stuart says, thanks again. Going to check out UK column. Harvey says, thanks for tonight. See you next time. See you next time, Harvey. See you next time also, Becky. Okay. So it just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.